Hello, this is Jaceson Barrus. I had the pleasure of directing West Side Story in the spring of 2018 at Plaza Theatre Company at Dudley Hall. It was a very memorable experience, something that I hold dear in my memory for several reasons. First of all, I always love the privilege of working with a great cast and crew and production team, and on that show we just had aces across the board. Our production team was first class. We ended up with a cast that was like no other. They were just a stellar group of people. And then the product that we came up with together ended up being something that we were all very proud of. And that bore itself out in the fact that we had wonderful audiences, and the story and the message and the show itself resonated with those audiences, and we heard again and again how much people enjoyed the experience of seeing that show. So I am excited today to be able to talk to you a little bit about West Side Story, the experience, and more than that, just kind of look at some of the concepts and ideas that we had as we were putting the show together. So rather than just doing a big overview of the whole show, I'm going to kind of let the pictures and the videos, the clips that we show you today, I'm going to let those kind of give you a feel for what it looked like on stage. Many of you may have seen the show, and if you didn't, hopefully these clips and photos will give you a feel for that. But I want to do a little deeper dive into some of the background of what we came up with. And so to do that, I want to focus a little more specifically on three different sections of the show. So I'm going to start with the gym dance. And one of the things that's very interesting about the show is when you sign the contract with the company that owns the rights to the show, there's actually a little rider in the contract that says that either A, you are going to completely mimic the original choreography from Jerome Robbins, and when you do that, you commit to do every single piece of his choreography. You say that you will not do a variation on the choreography that he originally created. And of course, his choreography is so good from that original piece of West Side Story that it's now become iconic. People recognize it instantly. And so if you do sign that part of the contract, you agree to do every bit of that. Well, in working with our choreographer Tabitha, it just didn't feel like we were going to have the freedom to create something that we thought would suit our stage, that would suit the ability of the performers that we had in the cast. And so we determined that we wanted to do all of our own choreography. Now, what that means is that in the contract you're saying that you will not use any of Jerome Robbins' choreography at all. Now, that also presents a problem because, well, of course, that choreography is iconic, and people do recognize it, and when it's iconic, people have an expectation that that's what they're going to see. And so you're kind of put into a position where you have to say, all right, we've decided to not do that choreography, so we are going to come up with something that we think will be equally memorable. Fortunately for me, I had the privilege of working with Tabitha Ibarra, who was the choreographer on the show, and she felt really inspired to come up with all original choreography, which is what we employed. So starting with the gym dance, which was a place where people, having seen the movie or having seen some of the original work on stage, know the choreographer really well. And so we were doing all new stuff. And I tell you, working from a production standpoint, watching the creation of the gym dance unfold was very interesting. Because on one hand, your brain has it in your head that they're going to, for example, they're going to bend their legs and flip their wrists and then snap twice, which you've seen 1,000 times. And here's Tabitha putting in choreography that is nothing like that. And it takes your brain a second to recognize that it's different. But in watching it, it became so magical to see this new creation emerging from the work that she and the cast together were doing. And ultimately, I think it resulted in a gym dance that was very special. Now, talking about the gym dance itself and just where it fits in the show, it's such a unique moment It's so interesting. Now, of course, many people realize and are aware that the West Side Story story itself is just a modern update adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. And so the gym dance mirrors the party where Romeo sees Juliet for the first time. And of course, in West Side Story, that is a dance where the rival gang members come to a community dance. And it's in the gymnasium of the high school. And they see each other there. Of course, they have very dangerous and angry feelings towards each other, and that's kind of seething through all of the movement and the dialogue of the scene. It's come to a head, their disagreement, and so it's going to result in something very dangerous. And through all of that, with the backdrop of the story, we see Tony and Maria see each other and feel that spark of attraction for the very first time. And so it's really a brilliantly constructed scene in the way that it's written. It's a beautiful update of obviously classic literature, which is wonderful. But through all of that, to see the story itself unfold and then have this original choreography in the round, complete with these beautiful costumes that Tina Barrus put together, the wonderful lighting that Cameron Barrus created. It just created an entire gorgeous motif for the entire show and really set the stage for the story to take flight.
Viewers too.
But of course, they are the same.
This is just so much to believe. You're not joking me, are you?
I have not yet learned how to joke that way. I think now I never will.
As a director, I like to maintain a presence throughout the run of a show. And the reason I do that is because I love the rehearsal process. I love the creation process. To me, the performance part of the show is kind of just the icing on the cake. The actual enjoyable part of the process to me is putting the show together, the spark of creation, if you will, as we're working together to put the piece into something that will make sense and come across to an audience. I love that part of it. And once you've gotten to the actual performances, I call that the harvest, because you've done all the work and now you get to actually enjoy the benefits of all that work. And so I do often, as I've directed, watch the work that we've done so I can enjoy those benefits. And I would watch this show. I watched the show every performance that I could. I think I only missed 3 or 4 shows. But one of the moments in the show that I always looked forward to with great excitement was the rumble at the end of the first act. So I talked a little bit about how in the gym dance, the two gangs have been seething and angry towards each other, and it's grown to the point where there's going to be a one big all-out fight, and that's going to be the rumble. So after some time, they get together, they have a war council, they determine to rumble, and it's going to be under the bridge. And we have this beautiful round space, and as we were considering how we were going to make it look as though it was under the bridge, we determined that what we could do was come down into the space, let the lighting work for giving us that shadowy, dark feeling underneath there, and that the thing that would establish the location as the actors came down into the space and jumped down into the stage, which was under the bridge, was to give us the sound effect of the cars passing by overhead. And that sound effect was created by sound designer Aaron Seiler, and it was just a beautiful moment that gave the scene so much depth and reality and made the audience understand exactly what was going on with just one little tiny feel for what was happening. I also have to credit the great work of Luke Hunt, who was our fight choreographer. He got the two gangs together, and the wonderful thing about the scene is the Tony has succeeded in making the rumble be just a fist fight. And the idea being just a fist fight to him is that there won't be any fatalities or any really serious injuries, because the other guys were really spoiling for a fight. But he's successful in getting it made to just a fist fight. And if you've seen the show, you know that through just a series of tragic events that occur during the fight, it winds up that Tony is drawn into the fight, and that he is the one, as he's trying to stop the fist fight, then it becomes a knife fight between the leader of the Jets, Riff, and the leader of the Sharks, Bernardo. And that knife fight tragically results in the death of Riff, having been stabbed by Bernardo accidentally. And then Tony, in his anger at seeing Riff's death, he takes the knife and then stabs Bernardo. So the leader of the two gangs, both are killed tragically in the end of this scene. And it's the way the first act of the show ends, as we see the bodies of these two boys laying on stage, and as everybody else scrambles to get away as they hear sirens in the distance. So the scene is very powerful, has a very meaningful message that relates, of course, to the story, but all of that connects back to that only works if all of those elements come together to make it something that the audience can appreciate as it's happening. So a wonderful team, again, worked with me to make that something special, and I want to show you a little part of it from this clip. Powerful stuff, right? So you can see why every night I wanted to come back and take a look at that. So I did say that I wanted to look at 3 sections of the show, but I lied. I'm going to look at 4. Because as I've been here talking, I thought, gosh, there's another section I want to talk about. So I'll do that after this next part. So every production of West Side Story I've been involved with, and the fact is, if you've been in musical theater for very long, you're probably going to come in contact with this show. It's definitely a warhorse. It's one that's been done again and again, certainly at community theater levels and above. And I've had the privilege of acting in the show multiple times, as well as working on production crew of the show several times. I've never actually gotten to direct it until the 2018 production, but I had been involved many times. Now, in every one of those productions, which were all very quality, there was a part of the second act that, on the page, in the script, it doesn't seem that it's going to be something that comes across very well. As you consider the original production of the show, actually, if you consider the movie, which is what most people have seen first, or from that, the original production of the show, this is the scene with the Somewhere song, or what you might call the dream sequence. So what happens is Bernardo's lieutenant, Chino, comes to the house where Maria is, and she's very excited because she knows that Tony will have stopped the rumble, and she is waiting there for Tony to come and tell her that he's made it all right, because she, in her heart, believes that Tony is going to be able to do that. Now Chino comes to the house, and he has to tell her that Bernardo is dead, and because of course Bernardo is her brother, and he realizes that that's going to be very painful to her, but he's not sure how to tell her. Well, there she's there with him, and he's trying to tell her as best he can, and as he's getting to the point where he's having to tell her, she asks about Tony. She's the most worried about Tony, and it upsets Chino a great deal, and then he says, no, who cares about Tony? He killed your brother. And that's the moment that Maria finds out that her brother Bernardo is dead, and Chino runs away, and right then Tony comes into her house. and he's covered in blood, and he's got this story to tell, and she's angry because she's found out that Tony's murdered her brother, and she felt like he was going to be able to stop the fight. And then he explains to her what's happened, and because of her deep feelings for him, she forgives him right in that moment. And then the two of them realize that their relationship can't exist in the world the way it is right then. And then that melts into this wonderful dream sequence where we see the world in the way it needs to be for their relationship to be able to work. And then we hear the beautiful and haunting song, There's a Place for Us, or Somewhere. And all of that has this beautiful Somewhere song. And here this beautiful dream ballet. And once again, blessed so much to have worked with gifted choreographer. Tabitha took this scene and, together with an unbelievable cast of performers, made it something very memorable. In all of my years of theater, to me, it's one of the things that stands out in my mind, being able to watch that scene and see these actors make it something incredible. But the idea behind it comes there from the script, and then we took that idea from the script and applied it in a way where it would work in the round, together with some just absolutely stunning lighting from Cameron, and a really interesting and unique idea costume-wise from Tina. So mixing all of those things together, giving the feel that we wanted to convey with the story came through. And then, of course, at the end of the scene, it all melts back into what it really is, which is the two gangs, rival gangs, just their anger and animosity towards each other, just overwhelming the love that these two star-crossed lovers have for each other. So I hope you enjoy this clip from Somewhere, from There's a Place for Us in West Side Story. as a director, I'm sure you can imagine seeing something that you put your heart and soul into. It's always very powerful to be able to do that, and I'm always reminded as I watch these clips what a great gift it is to be able to do this work and to work with so many wonderful, caring, and gifted people. And I'll always remember that scene. The last one I wanted to talk about is a tough scene, a hard scene in the show to do. So just to set the stage for the scene, so to speak, it happens later in the show. Maria is questioned by the thug policeman about where Tony is, and so she is unable to go to the drugstore and to be with Tony, and he's hiding at the drugstore. So in her place, she sends Anita to go to the drugstore and to warn Tony. Anita knows that this is the territory of the rival gang, the Jets, but because she cares for Maria, she goes to the drugstore to tell Tony, who has killed her lover, Bernardo, and yet she does that for Maria. But as she goes into the drugstore, the rest of the Jets gang is there. Now, of course, they're unbalanced. They've had their leader, Riff, murdered, and they're angry and scared, and all those things mixed in together. But here's Anita, the girlfriend of the leader of the opposite gang. And when she's there, tragically, they're taunting, and we called it the taunting, but the taunting, they taunt her and they attack her viciously, and they get to the point where they're going to do horrible things to her. And it was, and I'm sure all the actors involved would say this as well, it is an extremely challenging scene to rehearse, because you are undertaking these very difficult emotions, a place that you really don't want to go, but for the show to work, you need these actors to go to that place. You can't pull that punch, and so we determined together that we were going to do all that we could to bring honesty to the scene while making sure that the people involved in the scene were safe, and we practiced with great diligence and detail to ensure that there would be no injuries, but that we could get this story across. So it was a very delicate piece of rehearsal that became a very important part of the show. So I'm just going to show you a tiny clip of this. I'm not going to go through the whole part because out of context it just is very shocking.
Bernardo was right. If one of you was bleeding in the street, I'd walk by and spit on you.
Don't let it go. Tell Chino that Tony's hiding.
Let go! I'll give you a message for your American buddy. You tell that murderer that Maria is never going to meet him. Tell him Chino found out and shot her.
Now, of course, at the end of the show, a show full of tragedy, one of the most tragic things happens in that the two star-crossed lovers were able to come together, if only for a moment. And in fact, what happens is because Anita is so injured and angry at the way she's taunted and attacked by the Jets gang, she lies to them and tells them that Maria is dead, that Chino has killed her. And that lie gets to Tony, and he runs out into the night just full of anguish and just full of sorrow that this is what it's gotten to. And he runs through the streets calling for Chino to kill him as well. And at the theater, at Dudley Hall, we have this beautiful open space, all of these open backstage areas. And what we determined to do is that rather than having Tony move through the actual stage area in the theater itself, we would have him run through the halls of the building, calling out Maria's name and calling for Chino to come and kill him too. And as a director, to see this idea come into your head and to see the actors take that idea and make it fly and to sit in the theater and to feel how powerful that moment was.
Found out about you and her and shot her.
Chino? Chino? Chino?
And of course, that grows into the moment where Tony does find Maria is alive, and they come together for a moment, and then Chino ends Tony's life, and he dies in Maria's arms, and the tragedy is complete. And then Maria talks to the gang members as they stand around. So through all of that, it's just it's a powerful piece. Obviously, it's got deep emotional meaning, and as a director, you need to have people who are going to put every ounce of their heart and soul into making it play, or it's going to come across as counterfeit. And I was, twice blessed with a wonderful production team that put in their heart and soul to make it work, and then a cast that was just absolutely 100% committed to making the show something that people would see and remember. And I know as a director that when people saw that show, they remembered it, and that the message had some resonance to them in the way the original writers intended, in the way our production team intended, in the way the cast undertook it. And in all honesty, it was just a wonderful gift to play my small part in making that show work. So thank you for joining me today for this director's vision reminiscence about West Side Story. I hope you had a fun watching some of the clips and seeing these pictures and getting a little bit of insight into what we did. And I bid you a good day.